Okay, let's now move on to our next section, countries and regions in transition. We said that in general, over the last 50 years or so, that more countries have been changing from communist to capitalist, or maybe from mixed socialist economies to a mixed market economies than the other way around. And we have seen examples of this being a highly successful or was highly successful endeavor for some of these countries. But I think that we're going to add a little nuance to this conversation and try and take a deeper look into maybe why this was more successful in some countries than other countries, and then put a little bit of varying degrees of success. Okay, so we're going to start here, and the book here starts off by talking about Russia. Right, starts talking about old Soviet Russia, and the book doesn't mention it, but I'm going to come right on out with it. This was pretty successful during the early stages of communism in Russia. Look, Russia forever and a day had been behind the rest of Europe, all the way going back to the days of the Romans. There was clear that Western Europe and even Central and Eastern Europe were just more advanced than Russia. Moving into the 17 and 1800s, this was always a thing. And it was most clear during World War II, when Russia was really easily defeated by the Germans. And the Russians were told to go scavenge guns off of dead bodies of their fellow soldiers, because there just wasn't enough guns for everyone. They had been trained with broomsticks. And at this point, we're going to see that in Russia, they decide that we got to do something dramatic to catch up to the manufacturing capabilities of the rest of Europe. So when Lenin dies and Stalin takes over, he does these 2 5-year plans. And under these plans, he's going to be successful at greatly improving Russia's manufacturing capabilities. On top of that, after Russia wins in World War II, of course, Russia is on the side of the US and Britain. So after that Allied win in World War II, Russia steals all of the factories that existed, all of the German factories in East Europe. Russia takes all of them and moves them into Russia. I didn't even know you could do that. But they did, okay? And this also increases their manufacturing capabilities. So at first, this is really successful for Russia, and our book doesn't mention that. Listen, our book is very pro-capitalism, and that's cool, right? Because we're a Marxist mixed market economy, and our book, it is supportive of our style of economy. I just want to explain it in a true way so that you understand. Now, then there was the Cold War, 1945 to 1990, and the United States defeats Russia in the Cold War. Our economy is proven to be more successful. Their economy was proven to not work well for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that there was no profit motive. Why work hard when you can get paid the same for doing less? Why you don't even really need to start your own business. There's no innovation when the government is in charge of businesses. We found less innovation. So for multiple reasons, Russia and its model of Stalinist socialism, Marxist socialism, didn't work. Okay, it didn't, and this is the best example of why this economic system doesn't work. Is what we saw in the old Soviet Union. But I just wanted to point out that at first it was successful. Okay. And then when Russia does pull out, and the book doesn't include this, when Russia does change from being communist to being an attempt at mixed market economy in the 90s, this is one of the worst times in Russian history. The people of Russia suffered greatly in the 1990s. The book brushes right through it. They say, oh, they gave vouchers out and they allowed the government companies to be owned by private individuals. But really, what happens is that the people who buy out these businesses or get these vouchers are the rich. Okay, they're the old government workers or the old KGB. There was one of these guys named Vladimir Putin who became incredibly rich because he got a lot of vouchers to start businesses. And oh, by the way, he's been the leader of Russia for almost 20 years. Yeah, same guy, right? 20 plus years, I think. So that's also something that we should take a look at. Then Vladimir Putin takes back over when he becomes leader legally, and he takes back the oil industry. He takes back certain mining industries. Okay, and he he then kind of helps Russia get back on its feet because look, the price of gas was incredibly high in his first 10 years, his first 8 years, and this really helps Russia when you own the oil industry and every penny of profit is made the government keeps, and then it redistributes to the people who they feed them and they give them shelter and places to stay. It helped Russia. It helped the average Russian. So since then, their economy hasn't been growing as quickly as Western European mixed market economies have. But I just wanted to add some color to that whole conversation because I feel like the book doesn't do the justice I would like to see done. Next, we're going to talk about China. And we're going to say that China turns communist after World War II. Now, the US helps China in World War II, push the Japanese out. And afterwards, a guy named Mao Zedong, who had been hiding out, in the mountains, comes down, wins a civil war in China, takes over, and turns China to Russian-style Marxist socialist communism. This doesn't work in China. This is very unsuccessful. And when he takes it to that next step that the book calls the Great Leap Forward, we see starvation in the mass level, as the collectivization of farms, as food is taken from the farms to feed the city, the peasants are starving. This was very unsuccessful economic policy. And in the 1970s, Mao Zedong reaches out to the US, turning its back on the Soviets, who it had modeled its economy after. And Mao Zedong creates a more social, more capitalist, more market-style economy in the cities. I mentioned this to you before that in China right now, there's about 200, 300 million people, maybe more at this point, who live in cities and who live kind of lifestyles with an economy similar to ours. There are then 900 million people who live in the farm, in the countryside, who are peasants, and they live very communist still. So China's a very mixed model. China does what's right for China, and it's been working. China has had enormous growth over the last 30 plus years. But I want you to keep something in mind. Let's look at this for a second. China has 1.3 billion people. 300, 400 million are living capitalists. 900 million aren't. Here's the thing. All those 900 million people, they all want stuff too. They want jobs. They want opportunities. They want TVs and nice clothes and computers and phones and all of the modern things that exist. So as China pulls people out of poverty by the government creating opportunities, okay, one reason why the economy is expanding so much is because they're having this massive group of people coming out of poverty and wanting to buy stuff, right? And the more people buy stuff, the better the economy is. These people want cars. These people want the modern life. So that is also part of the reason why China has been so successful, is because they have this really large group of people, a billion people at one point, who wanted stuff. And as they got jobs and bought stuff, it just created a higher growth, much higher than we had in the United States. They were at 8, 10% for a decade or two. And that's really incredible. China has caught up, not completely, but their GDP has been moved more quickly than ours. This is an example of a market economy being successful. Next, we're going to talk about Latin America. Okay, and in Latin America, historically, well, let's look at post-World War II. There were a few governments where the military was in charge and there were dictatorships. Okay, and the military kind of dictated the economy and what the economy should do. And they have kind of become more democratic, like the whole world has after World War II. They have started to allow for more economic freedom. And this has helped these economies grow. But the book doesn't mention that Cuba after World War II was really successful as a communist nation, probably because they were being helped by the Soviet Union. That Venezuela was pretty successful at first as a communist country under Hugo Chavez, probably because they were being helped by the Cubans. That so this again is something that needs some nuance. That Argentina did have massive economic problems because of debt, because they were borrowing too much and not paying back their loans. They defaulted on their debt. Without the nuance being included, we don't quite understand why Argentina was less successful. So again, there's a lot to this conversation about Latin America and their economies and whether or not communism works for them. Look, the book brings up Chile, but what it doesn't bring up is that on September 11th, 1979, Chile had years earlier elected a socialist leader who ran on the idea of a glass of milk for every child. And the US government comes in and bombs the leader's palace, takes him out, Salvatore Allende, I think that's how you say it, and then installs a government that the US then props up. And one thing that the US did to help this government was help its economy, right? So do we really want to use Chile as the example of economic success? I don't know. But Venezuela has certainly seen a massive economic collapse after Hugo Chavez died. Maybe because the Soviet Union, because Cuba stopped supporting them, the Soviet Union stopped supporting them, so maybe they needed that support. Maybe it's because the US have had economic policies that worked against Venezuela because we don't want a socialist or a communist country in the Americas. Is that a possibility? Under the Obama years, he tried to help out Cuba and get Cuba back into our good standings. I mean, gosh, we've got a war with Vietnam. Vietnam is communist, but we don't have bad relations with them. But we have bad relations with Cuba. Now, I get it. They allowed Russia to build weapons, nuclear weapons on their shores and point it at us, and they're still angry there. But Obama says, look, it's been 50 years. Let's open up the door. And Cuba started to see an economic revival because before that, the United States has sanctioned Cuba. We had not allowed our country to trade with Cuba. And when the most powerful country in the world, who's 90 miles from your shores, doesn't allow other people to trade with you, that's going to hurt your economy. Nuance. So again, there's a lot to this conversation. I just want to throw it out there. And I'm not trying to say in any way this dispels what the book's trying to push, which is the idea that market economies are more successful than not than mixed socialist economies? They are statistically provable. Yes, but I think there's more to it than just the black and white. Again, I feel like there's a lot of shades of gray here.